Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey with Darcy on 90 Day Fiancé. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a couples therapist. I'm going to react to this as we go along, so let's see what happens.
When we got back to the hotel room, Tom ignored me, and we haven't talked since.
What are you going to do when you get back to Nottingham?
I don't know. Probably have to do some damage control.
I don't want you to make this trip out to be like it was, the worst thing ever. I really like Tom for you. I think he's a great guy, and
Thank you. Finally,
wish you guys
finally
the
found a
best.
good guy.
Yeah, and just
Don't mess it up. Is that what you're trying to say?
So I don't think I've commented yet on the dynamic between Darcy and Stacy. They seem to have an interesting dynamic. I think I talked a little bit about how there is very limited data evidence that they both probably grew up in a family with limited emotional resources, let's just say. Either emotional neglect, abandonment, maybe abuse. Impossible for me to know because they haven't talked about it yet. And side note, some of you have been complaining, or I've heard you've been complaining that I don't know everything about these people's lives. Apparently, maybe there's a lot of articles out there that are written about these people. I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible. I'm trying to just watch the show and react to what I'm seeing. I don't want to have all this extra information, so I hope that's okay with you. I think for some of you it's not, but I don't know. That just seems like one way to do it. Anyway, so they have an interesting dynamic. They seem to conflict sometimes in ways that are unfortunate. There seems to be a so the neglect or difficulties or mistreatment they went through as a kid, which I don't know, but if that did happen, it might have resulted in the two of them not being very close or supportive of each other. They seem to have a competition with each other. Stacy is seemingly critical of her sister, or at least Darcy thinks of Stacy as being overcritical. It seems like Stacy cares about Darcy, but it also seems like Stacy thinks that Darcy is a little ridiculous and makes a lot of bad choices. It also seems like Darcy, it's possible to know, but it seems like Darcy feels lesser than her sister Stacy, either because Stacy makes her feel that way or because of her low self-worth for whatever reason. It's always interesting. If you're not a part of a twin, or you don't have twins that are close to you, there's this notion that they're the same and they have the same personality. Well, any twin will tell you that that's just not true. And it points to how environment actually does shape personality. There are certain similarities between these two that we could point to, but there's also, I think, some big differences. The reason why is because the twins enter into a family and they have very similar biologies. They have the same DNA, but there's prenatal development that differentiates between the two people a little bit. But they're very, very similar, and they enter the same world at the same time, or 3 minutes apart. And they, as they grow up in a family, they experience very similar things, but they start to differentiate for a number of reasons. One, families will sometimes treat them a little differently. I mean, just the fact that one is named Stacy and one is named Darcy, or one was born earlier than the other one. People will treat twins differently sometimes. Also, the individuals will often want to be differentiated. Twins often like the fact that they're very similar, but they also don't want to be just part of a twin. They don't want to be mistaken always for their twin sibling. They want to be their own person. And so from the age of 1, 2, 3 years old, it begins where they start to actually try to differentiate. Okay, you're the one who asks for money. I'm the one who tries to smooth over conflicts in our parents. You're the one who is more outgoing in school. I'm the one who helps us do better with our schoolwork, or whatever it is. And over time, these develop into very distinct personalities that have very different sets of assumptions about the self, assumptions about others, and defense mechanisms. If I was to take a guess, I would say that Stacy was born earlier and that she was treated like an older sister, or she thinks of herself as an older sister. I don't know that, of course. At the very least, if I didn't know they were twins, I would think that Stacy was the older sibling because she tends to talk down to her, to Darcy a little bit. Darcy tends to try to please. The whole reason why Darcy even went to Albania in the first place, is it Albania? I think it was because she wanted to get Stacy's opinion about Tom. Instead of Darcy just doing this on her own, she's doing that. And then once they met up in Albania, I'm pretty sure it's that, they instantly started to have this conflict and things didn't go well at the expense of Tom and Darcy's relationship. So let's see how the rest of this conversation plays out, keeping that hypothesis in mind. Let's see if data supports or doesn't support that idea.
No. I mean, I could have gone to Gran Canaria and had a romantic trip, and I feel like Tom's a little upset about that. Well, I mean, you're free to go. You're free to go. We're not here to, sabotage your guys' relationship. That was never the point.
Tom had planned to take me to Gran Canaria, but we came to Albania instead. So Stacy can meet him to make sure that Tom is the right match for me. Because I didn't want another situation like with my ex-boyfriend, Jesse.
So just that data point right there, that Darcy is bringing Tom to Stacy so that Stacy can approve or disapprove of Darcy's choice to date Tom. That might sound a little odd, right? That might be reserved for like a parent or something, but Darcy is 44 now. She presumably should be able to make those choices on her own. Now, asking for help, there's nothing wrong with that, but the way that Darcy worded that, it's just like, I don't know how to do things. I'm incompetent. My sister is competent. She does know how to do things. And so I'm going to bring Tom to her and say, or do you approve of this? Now, at the same time, Darcy seems to resent that and in previous interactions didn't really bring Tom purely in a way to get Stacy's opinion. It looked like there was some complexity there that it ended up backfiring for everyone.
But I had tit for tat with Stacy, and I really do feel like Stacy's to blame. If we hadn't come to Albania, he probably would have proposed. I would have a ring on my finger, but I guess not.
Right, so that's some of that complexity. Darcy's like, hey, what do you think about Tom? And then things kind of fall apart. And then Tom feels neglected because he's like, why are we going out here? I wanted to take you on a romantic trip, just the two of us. Why are we going to meet your sister in Albania when we had this other trip, an island, a romantic island that is much more kind of the thing that I wanted to look for in a trip? Why are we doing that? And then things start to fall apart. And then now Darcy resents the whole process, even though Stacy might not have ever really asked for that responsibility. She might have been like, well, yeah, I mean, come out. It'd be great if you came out to Albania and the four of us got to know each other. You got to meet my fiance. I can meet Tom, and that, it'd be great. And now Darcy is blaming Stacy for the fact that her and Tom aren't working out. It's part of that lack of differentiation. I've talked about that in other videos. When we're raised in a way that doesn't give us a chance to develop a strong self, and I think there's a lot of data points pointing towards Darcy lacks differentiation. She lacks a sense of who she is and doesn't feel like she can do things on her own. And when things go wrong, you see her kind of crumble and she's just like, oh, I'm worthless. It's all my fault. The alternative to that is to blame others. Because in your default mode, it's like, it's all my fault. I'm worthless. This is hopeless. I'm demoralized. I'm always going to screw things up. No one's going to ever love me. Well, to protect yourself from that ball of horribleness, sometimes we'll resort to just blaming others. We'll just look for any old reason. And we will sometimes look toward family members whom we are still fused with. And so maybe that's what Darcy is doing right now. I mean, what I'll say is that I've hypothesized in previous videos that I'm not quite sure if Tom really likes Darcy. There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence of that. Now, Tom is very emotionally shut down, or emotionally non-expressive, or emotionally unaware. It's just hard. He's hard to read. He has that classic avoidant attachment style where he just doesn't seem to exhibit any neediness or any dependence or any emotion. His ex-girlfriend called him out on that, and he agreed with that. So it's hard to know what's happening. So if I was to speculate as to what went wrong, this is total guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if I talked to Tom and he was like, well, I really liked Darcy when we were chatting over video for a few months, and I wanted to see how things would go. And maybe being on a reality TV show would be kind of fun. Or, who knows what he was thinking. And then when Darcy landed in London, the two of them went on the first date, and Darcy drank a lot, and not, tremendous amount, but was intoxicated. And a lot of her, what I would perceive to be her traumas came up, her sadness and her worries came to the surface, and she was crying. She wasn't out of control. She was showing emotion, nothing wrong. But for Tom, he's not really used to that, either culturally or just in his family or whatever. And that made him uncomfortable. And in that moment, I wonder if it really turned off a switch for him, and he's just like, I'm not into this right now. Which, in dating, that happens sometimes, because there just didn't seem to be any evidence that Tom was really into her past that point. Then again, he could be really into her because he says he's really into her, but we wouldn't see it because of his lack of expressiveness. Anyway, let's continue watching.
You're putting the blame on me.
No,
Tori,
I'm getting vibes from Tom that he's a little annoyed.
Maybe he's annoyed with you. Okay?
Sure he is?
I don't think he's annoyed with us.
Okay. Well, I don't think it would have
been cordial, and we've shown him a good time, and
So as I also talked about in previous videos, this is a classic example of triangulation where Tom and Darcy have tension between the two of them. Darcy is really pursuing Tom. Tom is being distancing, and Tom is also disappointed and hurt or a little angry about the fact that they had to go on this other trip that they didn't have a lot of fun with. And so there's tension between Darcy and Tom, lots of tension. And Darcy is, and also both Tom and Darcy are triangulating Stacey right now, because Tom, in a previous conversation with Darcy, Tom was saying, well, if we hadn't been dragged out here by your sister, maybe I would have proposed to you, was basically what he was saying, which I find to be questionable, but who knows. So Tom was pulling in Stacey, and then now Darcy is going along with that and is also triangulating Stacey and saying that the reason why me and Tom are having problems is because of you, sister, Stacey. And Stacey's like, whoa, like how am I getting pulled into this? Now, as I always talk about, how do we make triangles functional? So Stacey is being triangulated in. How can she make this functional versus dysfunctional? Dysfunctional keeps things the same. It doesn't optimize the system so that people can get their attachment needs met. Functional triangulation is when we help to resolve the issue. At the very least, it doesn't get any worse. And at best, we can actually help people get their needs met, their attachment needs met. So if I were to sit on Stacey's shoulder and be a little therapist guide in this moment, trying to help Stacey to functionally triangulate, I might say to her, okay, validate your sister's feelings right now. Your sister is alone. She's scared. She's worried about her and Tom. She might be embarrassed and humiliated. She's going through a tough time, and she's taking it out on you, Stacey, which isn't fair. But, try to be the bigger person. And if you really want this to go well, at the very least, be a good sister and hear her out. So you might say something like, Darcy, okay, let's put the brakes on. I don't appreciate being blamed for this, but I totally understand why you're upset right now. It sounds like you and Tom are going through a tough time. And maybe it is my fault. I don't know. But I love you, sister. I care about you. What's going on? How are you feeling right now? I'm here for you. Let me what do I need to do to make this better? Maybe there's something I can do. Maybe there's not. So that requires differentiation in that moment, because you have to be able to receive someone's blame and anger and go, well, that's not me. That's part of that differentiation ability, is the ability to say, okay, they're attacking me. Is it really my fault? They're making it to be my fault, and I'm feeling worried that it's my fault. But wait a second, it's not my fault that her and Tom are. Maybe it's a little bit my fault, but not really my fault. It's not like I caused them to not be connected. I mean, surely love can exist in Albania as it can in the islands, and so it's not really. This is all going on very quickly in a differentiated person's brain, and they're like, okay, what do I want to see happen right now? Well, I don't want to fight with my sister. I don't want to continue to be blamed. What's really going on? Well, I bet you my sister is really suffering right now, and she's taking it out on me. Okay. So what's the plan of attack? Well, I should just empathize with her feelings. I should try to do some judo, let those accusations go by me. Don't really get caught up in that, and go for what really is happening right now is that my sister is really stressed out and she needs some support. That would likely help Darcy to relax, feel heard, get support. And this is how systems theory works, is when one person does something differentiated, it tends to work its way around the triangle. And so if Darcy feels supported and she feels good enough as a human being, and she can maybe go to Tom and say like, hey, well, let's start over, and let's maybe go back to London and have a romantic time, or whatever it is, that might help her. Now, a dysfunctional way of triangulating would be if Darcy were to defend herself, and as those accusations come, they get under her skin, and she can't differentiate between someone's accusations and her own self-worth, and it becomes all messed up. And so she's like, oh crap, what do I do? And she's hurt and stressed out and angry, and then she defends herself or goes on the attack, because I'm guessing that Stacey is feeling hurt right now. And so one way that people will defend themselves is they'll attack. And so she might say like, well, this is your fault. This, you always do this. Given Stacey's statements before, I can imagine her saying something like, don't blame me. You're the one who always picks the worst men to date. This isn't my fault. So let's see how Stacey manages her own differentiation level and the triangle.
But your relationship is making me uncomfortable in front of him. Oh, so we're to blame for your relationship. If he's gonna walk away, he's gonna walk away from you because of your issues.
So there we go. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, so it's unfortunate.
She's hurt, and I think she's just a little bitter right now.
As I always say, whenever they do these interviews away from the interaction, the people always have wonderful things to say that it would be great to say in the moment. Stacey was being standoffish and accusatory. I get it, because Darcy's accusing her of things that aren't really fair. But then they pull her aside and they interview her, and the first thing that Stacey says is, well, Darcy's hurt and she's really worried about her relationship. How come you can't see it in the moment? Now, I get it, because as a therapist and as a human being, that's what I do. Is my clients will come to me, we'll talk about it, they'll be able to see the light, so to speak, about a past conflict. But in the moment, you just get flooded, and it's hard to stay differentiated. That's what Bowen would talk about. Differentiation level is, depending on the dysfunction and the chaos of your childhood, you will emerge into adulthood with a certain differentiation level. And if things are going well, then you can operate at a higher differentiation level. And if things are going badly and you're being attacked by your sister and blamed, then you'll be a lower differentiation level. So it kind of makes sense.
I think she sees my relationship with Florian, and we're in love. So she's just taking it out on me. All right, that's how you feel. That's how you feel. You kind of started it. I was here. I'm trying to help you with your bags, and.
Okay, so that's interesting. They pull Darcy aside, and what she's saying is not empathizing with Stacey the way Stacey was empathizing with Darcy when they pulled Stacey aside, and Darcy is continuing to blame Stacey.
On a good note, but if that's how it's gonna be, then not a problem. Goodbye. See you in Connecticut. Bye.
It's heartbreaking. They're twins, they're sisters. They've been through so much together. They know each other so well. And to see them turn on each other like this in when both of them need each other, if they could have just empathized with each other and not been accusatory and manage their triggers well. This is the tragedy of families with a lot of chaos. If you grew up in a family with a lot of chaos, it's possible that you have a complicated relationship with your siblings. It's also possible that you and your siblings are really quite close. But both things can happen in a chaotic family of origin. And it looks like for the two of them, they developed a dynamic of competition early in life, because I talked about this before. When parents don't give enough love and attention to the children end up considering their siblings to be competitors for the little bit of love and attention that is coming down from their parents. And so they end up hating and really resenting their siblings. And just speculation, maybe that's what's happening here.
Oh, hey, Tom.
Hi there.
Yeah, I just said goodbye to Darcy, but she's in a mood, so just want to give you a hug. Have a safe flight.
Yep. Cool, thanks.
I'll see you guys in England one day, I'm sure.
One day.
Hopefully she doesn't mess it up.
Yeah.
If he doesn't walk away first.
So there's that comment from the older sister of, well, if she doesn't screw it up. So that probably points to a larger narrative that might even extend to other members of Darcy and Stacey's family, that Darcy is the screw up and Stacey is the smart, competent one, when both of them lack differentiation and they've just specialized into their roles as children. Darcy, the system, this is a lot of speculation here, but this is something I see a lot of. When you have a family where, well, in any family really, people will specialize their roles. Like the father is the one that likes to play rough and tumble games, and the mother is the one who likes to nourish through food, and the older brother is the one who likes to cheer people up, and the younger sister is the one who does really well in school and makes the family proud, and these kinds of things. So all families do this. In my family, I have 3 siblings. We have a lot of similarities, but we all kind of have our role, because children, like, as I said earlier, they like to have their own identity. Everyone likes to have their own identity. And part of the way children do that is to look to their siblings and say, okay, well, I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like them. So I'm going to do this other thing. Now they might share qualities with their siblings, but they want to have their own space in the family. And this can be emotional space, like this is the person who expresses sadness. This is the person who expresses anger. This is the person who talks back to mom when she gets out of control. Or there's all these specializations and roles that family members will take. And for undifferentiated families with a lot of fusion and a lot of difficulty and a lot of chaos, because people aren't getting their needs met, and because people are afraid of not getting the little bit of love and attention that they're getting from each other, and that includes the parents, then these specializations become rigid and become inflexible, because the people are thinking, well, if I diverge from my role, I could lose out on the little bit of tiny crumbs of love and attention that I get through this role. So Stacey may have had a tendency, and so in a more healthy family, Stacey might have been, sort of competent, and she knew how to do things well, and her life was always together. But she was flexible, where she could make mistakes sometimes, and she could admit that she makes mistakes sometimes, and she could allow other people to take care of her sometimes. But more often than not, she was the one who took care of other people. Who knows? But because of the chaos in the family, she became rigidly, I always have to be competent, which means I always and what's one of the ways that you can always establish your competence growing up? Well, it's to compare yourself to your sister and say, like, well, a really easy way for me today, since I can't achieve all these things, at the very least, I can be competent compared to my sister. I mean, look at her. And one of the ways that you can make sure that happens is by criticizing, putting her down, making her feel like a terrible person, because when people feel like they're a terrible person, then they tend not to function very well, because they're very stressed out when they're faced with being evaluated. And Darcey might have developed a role in the family as being the screw up, of being the person who needs help. Because now why would you want that, right? Competence for Stacey, that seems like, well, of course you would want to feel competent. Why would a system want someone who is incompetent? Why would an individual volunteer subconsciously in a system to be like, I'll be the incompetent one? Well, because as you're incompetent, people might help you. They might reach out to you and try to help you. Now, it's very complicated for the Darcys of the world because it's like, okay, I'm getting love and attention because I screwed up again, but I also feel like a screw up. So none of these roles have, are all wonderful. For the Stacys of the world who are overly competent and they're rigidly in that role, of course, it's great to feel competent and be seen as competent. But the downside is you can't be incompetent. You can't make mistakes. You can't ask for help. You can't reach out and say, I don't know what I'm doing right now. Can anyone please guide me? So that sucks too, right? Now, I'm not saying these are super rigid roles the two of them are having, but in the scenes that this show is showing us, there seem to be a lot of themes in that direction of the Darcey and Stacey roles that they probably developed at the age of like 3, 4, 5 through adolescence. This is all to say that is potentially why Stacey would say such a mean thing of like, well, if you don't screw this one up, you always screw this up. That's what I was getting at. We just heard, so let's rewind that and watch that again.
Have a safe flight.
Yep. Cool, thanks.
I'll see you guys in England one day, I'm sure.
One day.
Hopefully she doesn't mess it up.
Yeah. If he doesn't walk away first.
So there it was, if he doesn't walk away first. Okay, well, that does it for yet another installment of my reaction videos to Darcey on 90 Day Fiancé. Everyone out there, if you aren't already a patron, please do that. That's what we like when people do that. I get a little email whenever someone becomes a patron on patreon.com. When you become a patron, you get access to arguably our best episodes. There's probably a few hundred episodes that are just for patrons. And also, I don't know if this is always going to be true, but I'm starting to do Q&A on YouTube only for patrons at times. If you don't know that, I do a Q&A on Thursdays at 2 Seattle time. Depending on when this episode comes out, at least that's what I'm doing right now. So anyway, I'm rambling. Please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.